start with this. Well, Stephen Fulton Jr. had this to say. He says, Brandon Figueroa only knows one way to fight, and I'd knock out Inoue at 122 pounds. Fulton on saying unification fight with Brandon Figueroa will be an easy KO. He doesn't use his range. He doesn't use his height, so technically, I'll be the bigger fighter. I'll be the taller fighter. I'll be the rangier fighter. He doesn't use it. He doesn't know how to use those abilities that he has. He only has one way to fight. On believing he should be rated pound for pound after beating Figueroa, when I become victorious over Brandon, I believe I'll be considered in pound for pound. Not only that, I believe I will have the Fight of the Year candidate. And after that, I see I could be Fighter of the Year. On a possible fight with Naoya Inoue, I see me wiping him out clean. He's too small for me. He's too short. His reach isn't there. I'm not going to sit there for those power shots all the time. He's good, but he's not better than me. I believe what happened to Neri will happen to him. On staying at 122 until he becomes undisputed champion, there's never been an undisputed champion at 122. I need to be the first to do that, and then move up and probably face Emmanuel Navarrete for that WBO title. 126 pounds. Let me tell you something.
What?
Stephen Fulton, the reigning WBO super bantamweight champion, he's not off base about Brandon Figueroa.
He's not.
He's not off base about being a potential pound-for-pound candidate.
He's not.
And I'll go as far as saying he may not be off base about Naoya Inoue. So let's start with the Brandon Figueroa stuff. I agree. Brandon Figueroa is a very statuesque guy for 122 pounds. A lot of length, a lot of height, but he don't use it. You guys saw that Luis Neri fight.
You saw it.
I'm not telling you it was a bad fight. I'm not telling you it was a boring fight. I'm just telling you that in that fight, what you saw is that
No defense.
Brandon Figueroa has no defense, and Luis Neri has even less defense than Brandon Figueroa does. In that fight, you saw a very statuesque Brandon Figueroa mix it up in the phone booth with Luis Neri, and it did work out for him. It did.
He stopped Neri.
It was a fight that was fought within close quarters. Mid-range to inside fight. A fight that was fought deep in the pocket. Brandon Figueroa having the height and the reach that he has, he shouldn't have to mix it up in the pocket as much as he did.
To land shots.
In order to get off shots. This guy's got enough height and enough reach that if he used it properly, he should be able to beat a guy long distance, long range. Especially a smaller guy that, moved up in weight like Luis Neri. Because Luis Neri wasn't exactly proven at 122 pounds. He fought there once or twice. He was the reigning champion ahead of that fight. He was elevated to champion. WBC champion after Ray Vargas went on his hiatus. His stint of inactivity that he's still on, by the way. He's Stephen Fulton is right. This guy don't use his height. This guy don't use his reach.
He don't.
I'd wager at 122 pounds, Stephen Fulton is a much stronger puncher who's more defensively responsible than Luis Neri was in that fight with Brandon Figueroa.
Mm-hmm.
You might get away with defensive lapses in judgment against Luis Neri, but I don't think you're going to get away with those defensive lapses in judgment against Stephen Fulton. I just don't. Brandon Figueroa ain't the fight statuesque fighter to favor fighting deep in the pocket, the fight statuesque fighter that favors banging in the phone booth. He's not. I mean, Emmanuel Navarrete likes to do that, but Emmanuel Navarrete is a more awkward guy and a much bigger puncher by a wide margin than Brandon Figueroa.
He is.
Brandon don't punch like Emmanuel Navarrete. And if he did, perhaps that's a different conversation. But I'd wager that Brandon don't pack the wallop that a guy like Navarrete does. And because he doesn't, giving up his height, giving up his reach to someone like Stephen Fulton, I think it could cost him. And I like Stephen to win that fight. I like him to unify those two world titles. The WBO he's currently in possession of, and Brandon's newly obtained WBC title. If he does unify those two world titles against yet another unbeaten champion, lest we forget, Angelo Leo was an unbeaten champion when Stephen fought him. Brandon would be the second unbeaten world champion Stephen would have faced if he succeeds in unifying those two world titles. I think he's right. I think that's a decent argument to consider him one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, I dare say.
Talk about becoming an undisputed champion.
He would have to see MJ Akhmadaliev to pick up those other two alphabet titles in order to become this division's undisputed champion. And that's another conversation entirely. MJ Akhmadaliev is a far more capable boxer than Angelo Leo or Brandon Figueroa. I mean, before you start talking about moving up to 126 pounds to challenge Emmanuel Navarrete for his WBO title, the version of it he holds up there, you gotta get past MJ. If undisputed is a part of the conversation, that's the man you have to go see after the Figueroa fight. We've no guarantees that that's going to happen because MJ is a matchroom fighter. I mean, I like what I'm hearing from Stephen Fulton, and I'm hoping that he follows through on that promise, follows up on his word. I'm hoping he does that, but the reality of that situation is politics could get in the way of that fight.
Could get in the way of an Inoue fight, too.
Oh, yeah, Inoue, who's set to be defending his world titles, his 2 world titles against Das Marinas later on this month on the 19th. Politics could get in the way of Inoue versus Fulton because Inoue's with Top Rank. He's not actually at 122 pounds yet. He's down there at 118, but better still. Politics are more or less already getting in the way of Inoue versus what other champions are in his own division. You know, John Real Casimiro. We got to see what Nonito Donaire wants to do. We got to see who he ends up fighting next. I mean, I'd love for an Inoue versus Donaire rematch to be the very next fight we see, but, you know, Donaire's last fight was under the PBC banner. Was picked up by Tom Brown, so who's to say Donaire versus Casimiro doesn't happen?
Or Rigo.
Just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give it to you. Could be Donaire versus Casimiro. Could be Donaire versus Guillermo Rigondeaux, provided Guillermo Rigondeaux makes it past Casimiro. It could break down a lot of different ways, man. But it's still the subject here is Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue. That being said, politics could get in the way of that fight. Inoue is a top-ranked fighter, and it might be a while before he moves up to 122 pounds. By the time he does, who knows, Stephen Fulton may have left that weight class, may have left that division. It's not that he's off base when he says that he might stop Inoue. Maybe he would. This is Inoue's third division, after all. 118 pounds is Inoue's third weight class. That's saying this is a little guy that's moved up 2 times already. If he moves up a third time,
122.
moves up to 122 pounds, well, yeah, that might be one mountain too high to climb. So Stephen's not off base, though ultimately it just might end up being much ado about nothing. Thus, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I'm not convinced Inoue versus Fulton ever happens, ever takes place. Still holding out hope we get Fulton versus Akhmadaliev, let alone Fulton versus Inoue. Not a guarantee we get either of those fights. So, once again, Stephen Fulton, he's not off base, though ultimately many of these stories are stories that only time can tell. In other news, former unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz Jr. took to social media and said, "I'm ready to get back in the ring. Who do you want to see me fight next?" And, you know, he's got options, even though there's not much chance of him fighting for a world title in the near future.
No.
At least not in his next fight.
No.
He does have options. I mean, he does have his stablemate, Luis Ortiz. We know Luis Ortiz ain't got a dance partner. He just offered himself up to fight Anthony Joshua if things with Usyk don't work out. So Luis Ortiz ain't got a dance partner. Andy doesn't seem to have one. Why not make a fight between them? Blockbuster fight over the summer. I don't see why that's not a realistic possibility. Dillian Whyte's next fight, his next fight, is supposed to be in America. He's in the market for an opponent.
Fight him.
We know Dillian Whyte offered Andy Ruiz Jr. a multi-million-dollar offer to do a fight last year. I don't see why that should be off the table this year. We know DAZN's got the money. We know they're good for it. We know they've got the scratch. They've got the cash. I don't understand why more of an effort isn't being put forth by Andy to have that fight, because Dillian Whyte is viewed in several circles as a beatable guy with a good resume in some circles, guy who people's resume like to nitpick in others, but better still, he is viewed as a beatable guy. It's an even enough contest that I think the fight could get attention. I certainly think Andy Ruiz Jr. could make decent money fighting Dillian Whyte.
Probably more than he would with
Let me
Ortiz.
tell you something, sweetheart. Let me tell you one fucking thing. Luis Ortiz ain't got a fan base. Wilder does, and the only guys that talk up Luis Ortiz are Deontay Wilder's fans. Deontay Wilder's fans who talk him up for Deontay Wilder having beaten him. Outside of that, Luis Ortiz ain't got the fans. Dillian Whyte, he does. He does have his own set of fans. That could make for a sizable payday now that the situation has stabilized with the pandemic. In the thick of the pandemic, they offered Andy Ruiz Jr. something like, what was it, $3-4 million? Something like that. What do you think the fight is worth now that the crowds are back?
You ain't got to worry about flying to the UK.
Dillian Whyte wants to have his next fight in the U.S. of A. You'd get some Brits to board a plane for that fight, I think so. You'd definitely get some Chicano support here in the United States for Andy Ruiz Jr. if that fight took place somewhere in South California.
Sup, Cal?
One of the bigger boxing scenes here in the United States. I mean, I don't understand why Andy Ruiz Jr. don't put the pedal to the metal to get himself that Dillian Whyte fight. I mean, Dillian Whyte's the same guy that got smoked by an old Povetkin, right? I mean, that's what his critics like to say, that Dillian can't be that good based on what happened in the Povetkin fight. If an old Povetkin can do that to you, surely a guy like Andy Ruiz Jr. could do better.
Right.
Everybody seems to lose their pen once Dillian Whyte is in the market for an opponent. They can talk about him. I talk about him just fine. Comes to fighting him, they leave that to everybody else.
Andy was laughing at him when he got knocked out.
Yeah, I don't want to fucking hear it. I mean, I really don't. Because Andy Ruiz Jr., same guy that was willing to go in there with Chris fucking Areola for a guarantee of, what was it, $1 million?
That's it.
And you only sold about 150,000 pay-per-view buys, if that. So we all know, powers that be often like to talk up these numbers. They like to fudge them just a little bit, okay? You got time for Chris Areola and a guarantee of a little over $1 million? But you ain't got time for a multi-million-dollar guarantee with Dillian Whyte.
What?
Let's just cut the fucking crap already. Let's just call it what it is. You're free. He's free. You ain't gonna have to fly to the UK. He's coming here to America for his next fight. So what's the problem?
You got Eddie Hearn's number.
You know how to contact that guy. You just slid into his DMs not that long ago asking for a Joshua Trilogy fight. If things don't work out with Usyk. Well, things might end up working out with Usyk because they're talking about that fight taking place in September at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium over there, United Kingdom, across the Atlantic Ocean. AJ's busy. Dillian isn't.
You guys gotta stop giving these guys passes to duck fights.
I mean, if it ain't Ortiz and it ain't Whyte, who are you gonna fight? What, Charles Martin?
Give me a break.
Look, it's not even a bad fight. Ruiz versus Martin ain't a bad fight. It ain't a pay-per-view worthy fight either. And neither was that Areola fight.
150,000 pay-per-view buys.
Special attention has to go to who it is Andy Ruiz is going to be fighting next. Because he has options. He has fucking options. He's got options on his own side of the street, and he has options elsewhere.
You just had your fucking tune-up fight.
You did that, and you got that out of the way, and now it's time for things to get serious around here. In stranger news, an unexpected move from Badu Jack. Badu Jack plans a permanent move to the cruiserweight division. Portion of the article reads, the 37-year-old Jack, 23 wins, 3 losses, 4 draws, 14 knockouts, floored late replacement Dervin Kalina, 15-1, 13 KOs, 3 times in the 4th round to secure a stoppage victory Sunday evening on the undercard of the exhibition contest featuring Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Logan Paul at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. The game plan was to just outbox him. Everything else will come, said Jack. He was a little soft in the body, but give him respect. He came out to fight me on short notice. He's supposed to fight next week, but this is a different level. Jack, who turns 38 in October and has held the WBC super middleweight title and a secondary WBA light heavyweight belt, implied that he could soon move up in weight. My goal is to become a 3-division world champion, he said. I walk around really heavy. I'm about to be 38 years old, and I don't like to cut weight. So I'll get with my team and see what's next. The 200-pound division currently has 4 title holders. Unbeaten Frenchman Arslan Goulamarian holds the WBA title. Congolese fighter Lunga Makabu possesses the WBC. The UK's Lawrence Okoli is the WBO titleist. And Latvia's Maris Bridis holds the IBF and the Ring Magazine World Championship.
I don't think Jack's cut out to be up there.
And there's so much unfinished business in the light heavyweight division. Given the risks, given the perils that Badu Jack would face attempting to campaign in a title run in the cruiserweight division, he might as well just take his chances in the light heavyweight division. I mean, I don't understand this. And on the face of it, it seems like a move, at least to me, that's motivated by politics. Listen, Badu Jack, if he was a full-fledged champion, it only lasted for a little while. It only lasted for a second. When Andre Ward retired, Badu Jack was in possession of the WBA's regular title. And once Andre retired, you could have argued that Badu Jack was the full-fledged WBA champion. But it only lasted for a second as Badu Jack let go of that WBA title, and it landed in the hands of what was his mandatory challenger, Dimitri Bivol, who is still that division's WBA champion, defending WBA champion, here today. Why not just challenge Dimitri Bivol? Why not just challenge Joe Smith Jr.? Why not just challenge Artur Beterbiev?
Why not?
Let me tell you something, sweetheart. Those guys, they ain't cruiserweights. You got a better chance against those guys than what you got against the Lunga Macabus and Maris Bridises. of the world.
Badu Jack ain't got the size to be up there.
He might have the skill, he might have the experience, but not the size and not the punching power. Badu Jack wasn't the biggest of punchers at 168 pounds or even 175, much less in the cruiserweight division, which is really just a nose hair away from the heavyweight division. He says he's turning 38 real soon. He says he doesn't want to have to keep cutting weight no more. He doesn't want to have to keep cutting down to 175. Talked about this in the past in reference to Danny Garcia, who has so decided to campaign as a junior middleweight. That, you know what? Maybe making welterweight is hard for you. Maybe it would be easier to stick at 154 as far as the weight goes, but as far as the competition, whether or not he can hack it, I can't give Danny Garcia any odds against the Tony Harrison, any odds against the Jermel Charlo, any odds against the Julian Williams. I can't give Danny Garcia any kind of odds against those fighters, any kind of odds against Brian Castagneo. I'd wager that Tim Tszyu, even here and now, Tim Tszyu of Australia, would give Danny Garcia a run for his money and perhaps beats him at that weight. Something very similar applies to Badu Jack. You go up the cruiserweight division, that's just one pit stop away from the land of the giants, the heavyweight division, and I certainly don't think Badu's cut out to campaign as a heavyweight, let alone a bridgerweight or even a cruiserweight. No, I don't. I don't think struggling to make 175 makes Badu cut out to campaign anywhere else. Those are big guys up there in the cruiserweight division. Those guys are guys that are just a nose hair away from campaigning as heavyweights. I mean, look at the physical dimensions of Lawrence Okolie.
He's going up there so he doesn't have to make 175 anymore.
You know what it is? It's that all the belts are on other sides of the street. I mean, that's what's going on. You know, the WBA title's on the Matchroom side of things. The other 3 Alphabet titles with the other 2 champions, they're over there top rank. Badu Jack is a TMT fighter, but that's just another way of saying he's a PBC fighter. I guess they don't want to send Jack, or maybe Jack doesn't want to have to go to other sides of the street for fights.
Thinks going to cruiserweight's a solution.